All right, so I'm gonna start with a pre-built Django application. So you won't get to see me go through the tedious process of building this up from scratch. But I'll just kind of give you an overview. So we'll start with the settings. So we can see a couple things from the settings. One is that we're using the default SQLite database. And looks like we have one app called blog and nothing else. All right, so I can see that I have a blog app, so I know I've got one custom app in this project. So I go to URLs, and I can see that this first route, the /admin route, comes pre-made with Django, and there's this other route that's been added, which is posts. And if someone goes to example.com/posts, they're going to get referred to the next router, basically, which is blog.urls. So we have this blog, and then we have URLs. So blog.urls is right here. Oops, let me get rid of that. So from the original URLs, which remember is example.com/posts. So example.com/posts nothing is going to call this post list method. Example.com/10 is going to call this post detail, and so on. So we have a bunch of other routes which are based on they assume the existence of example.com/posts. So we can go here into our views, and we have post list, and post list is going to get all of the post objects and then return them basically wrapped up in HTML. And the same thing with the detail view, but instead of getting all of them, it's just going to get one of them based on the ID. So if you go to example.com/posts/10, it's going to have that available right there as the second parameter, and you can get the 10th post. Then we have a function to create a new post, and then to edit a post, and then deleting a post. So this is all pretty standard, like all the standard REST stuff, where you can see one particular thing, you can see everything, you can add a new thing, you can edit a thing, you can delete a thing. So that's CRUD for you. And then in our models, also very simple, we have a post which inherits from Django's basic model, and then we have 3 columns: author, which is a foreign key. I'm not sure if we've seen this exactly, but Django has a built-in user model. You can also inherit from that model and customize it, but we're just using that as is here. So what we're saying is that every post is going to belong to a user, and that user is going to be basically the default built-in Django user. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and run this. Actually, I'm gonna run migration. So Python image.py make migrate. That's not spelled right. Okay, so we got the make migration. So this added this new thing, this post right there. So now I'm going to actually migrate. So Python manage.py migrate. And this adds all of the built-in default stuff as well as my thing right here. Okay, so all of the database prep work is now done for the application. So I should be able to run it and use the database normally. So Python manage.py run server. So I'll go here. And I can see that there's nothing because I don't have a route for nothing. It assumes example.com/admin or /posts, but not /nothing. So I go to posts, and then I have a form, and it's got, if we look at the code, like why is there nothing displayed there? If you look at the code, you can see that it's getting all of the post objects, and there aren't any, and then rendering that. So if we inspect this, you can see that it's empty. If I go to /post/new, should be able to add a new one. Okay, list index out of range. So it's looking for a user, but I don't have a user. I don't have a user logged in yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a super user for now. So Python manage.py create super user u. And then I'm going to run the server again. I'll go back. This time I'll go to admin.
Yeah.
No, whoops. Okay. And I'll log in as the super user. Let's see. Might have messed up that.
Didn't you do no password?
I did a very simple password. Let me try this again.
Yeah, I noticed when you type in password, it doesn't show you typing anything.
Yeah.
When I did create user.
Yeah, that's a security thing. Username's already been taken, so let's try U2. U2. Yes. And run server. Okay, hopefully this works. U2. All right. Not sure. I probably just maybe something was cached or something. All right. So because in the admin here, I registered the model. That's why we can see it here. So users, I want to see if so that one is there. I'm going to go ahead and delete this user. Okay, so I have my admin user and then post. So I'm going to create a post here real quick. And then I'm going to go back to posts, and I can see that I have this one, and there should be a link which should take me to the detail view from which I can edit. And I should also be able to go to new. And if I go now back to the admin, I should see that that second post belongs to the super user. So I didn't specifically when we did this last week, the kind of default setup would be to have the user tell you what user they are, right? So we need to associate, every post has a foreign key, which should be an author, which should be a user. So how do we get that? Well, one way, the bad way is that give a drop down of every user in our application, and then have someone choose which one they want to own the post. We'd like to get that implicitly based on what user is logged in. And there is a way to do that. So in the views, so when you create a new post, here's the logic here. So it's going to do the standard. It's going to check if it's a post request or a get request. And if it's a get request, so that initial request that you make, it's going to give you a blank form. If it's a post request, that means you're getting a filled out form, basically. So it's going to take all of the information from the form, and it's going to create a new form instance that's been filled out. And that's just how Django does it. So now we've got basically, we're going to create a new instance of the form, but with the relevant information contained in it. Then we're going to do this is valid check. And then once you do that, here's where the extra bit comes in. So we're going to save the form, but you pass in commit equals false. So that basically gives you access to what you're going to save without actually saving it to the database. So we have this form, and then this is actually not necessary. But the so we only have one user. So the way that this is currently set up, this will actually work. But this is not a very good way to do that. So instead of that, we can do is we'll print, for example, request dot. Well, let's just print the whole request for now, and we'll see. So I'm gonna comment this stuff out for now. And I'll go back here and I'll create a new one. Let's see. So we have this this request object. So I'm gonna call dir on this to see what we have available. Go back and do the same thing. And we have all this stuff available to us. And notice at the end, there's something called user. So we should be able to grab the user that way. So let's take a look. So print request user. Go back here. We'll look at the logs again. And after all that junk, you can see that U2. So this is the super user that I'm logged in as right now. So Django does some magic stuff for us. And one of those magic things is that in the request object, it includes the currently logged in user. If no user is logged in, then you get something called an anonymous user, which basically just means the person making the request is not logged in. So we can actually use this request.user. So instead of this, which is not reliable, we'll do commit false, and then we'll do post.author equals request.user. And then we'll save it and redirect. So just as a sanity check, let's go back to the admin, and we can see that all that stuff I've added should not have shown up in the database. So admin posts. So none of those things exist. So I'll create a post 3. So that actually works. And if I go to the admin, that post should be associated with U2, this super user that I'm logged in as. So the basic pattern for getting the user, so you're often going to want, to associate someone saving something, it's probably related to them in one way or another. So this is the basic pattern you use. You call save, you do commit equals false, then you add whatever other stuff you want to add. It could be, the user, it could be, for example, this is not being used in the model, but you could add like you could add a timestamp, created at, modified at, whatever, right there. You could also do some other checks. You could do more advanced logic. You could check if something else exists or make an API call somewhere else and then use that information, include that. So you can do whatever you want in here, and then you save it. You actually save it. And then you do the normal redirect. So any questions about that?
Yes, so the post.publish date using date time, that was only unnecessary because it was like optional to have to show the
Yeah.
user that.
So this model, so this is an example of the kind of thing that you might want to get dynamically. Excuse me. But the model doesn't actually. So if I added a publish date, excuse me. If I added a publish date here, which we could do, so published date equals models dot date field. Is it date time or date? Let me check. I think date time. So we're gonna have one issue. So I'll go ahead and try to run this migration, but we are gonna have an issue. I'll keep that there. Okay. Quit the server, and I'm gonna run Python manage.py make migrations. So has anyone seen something like this?
I've seen it once. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're if you create your models and then you do some stuff and then you try to update the models, occasionally you'll try to run a migration, basically update your database in such a way that it will break some rules. So you have two incompatible versions of the database. And here, can anyone tell me what the problem is? So I'm trying to add this field. I'm trying to add a new column to this table.
Is it because there's already existing posts and there's no date or time associated for those posts, so you kind of have to go back and make one for all of them?
Exactly. Yeah. So I have a new field, publish date, and by default, I believe it's going to be not null. So we're creating a new field and we're saying you have to have a publish date. But there's already data in the table that doesn't have a publish date. So you have this contradiction. So you have a couple options. One, you could, before you run the migration, you could go run like an update statement. So you could look at all the data in your database and then add the relevant field to it or something like that. You can also create like a default value, which will be given to all those things, and then you could go back later and update them to something. Another option is that you could just make this a nullable field. And generally speaking, anytime you add a column to the table that already exists, let's just say this has already been running in production for a year or something. Basically, any new field you add is going to be nullable. And you can indicate that here. So I forget, there's there's actually two different values you can have to indicate that something doesn't have to exist. One of them is blank. Blank equals true. And I believe that blank is for, it's like at the form validation level. So you can like not have something in a form, but that doesn't affect the database. And then there's another one, dang it, what is it? Does anyone happen to know off the top of their head?
No.
Is it empty, I think?
I mean, it could be empty. Let me see. Blank, null. So yeah, I guess it is just null. Okay, so null. So if we do this, so I'm going to do quit. Oops. So now I've saved this and I say null. I think I don't need the blank equals true. Blank equals true just refers to the form. But actually, we probably do want blank equals true in that case. Okay, so make migrations, and I don't get that error anymore. So because I make this nullable, it doesn't break anything that already doesn't exist in the database. So I'll run migrate. And there we go. And now I'm going to run the server again. And we'll go in the admin panel first. And I'll check out this. Notice that we have this new publish date field, which is blank for these other already existing values. Now, if we go to create a new one at this point, that field doesn't show up in our form because it exists in our model now, but if we look at the form that was created, we just say we want the title and the text only to be exposed to the end user. So these are the fields we want to show up in the HTML. But our model actually has 4 fields. It has author, which we don't want exposed, and publish date, which let's just say in this case, we don't want exposed. So we just want to get author and publish date kind of in an automated way. We don't want the user messing around with that. But so if I go to create a new one, so 4, if I save this and I go back to admin posts and look at the 4th one, it does have an actual publish date. And that's because in the views, we did this form.save commit as false. We added we got the author from the request.user, and then we got the publish date from just the timestamp at that instant. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, so now I'm going to do something else. So I'm going to actually go back. I'm going to get rid of this for now. Yeah, I'll just leave this. Okay. So we have all of our views now are functions, right? It's a functional. So we have all these functions you call. If you go to / post / nothing, you get all of them. You go to / post / 5, you get the 5th post. But all of these are methods that are being called. Django also, and you also notice that there's a lot of repeated kind of stuff here, right? There's a basic pattern, especially for the edit and create routes. So we check if it's post or get, and then we create the form, we check if it's valid, blah, 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 right? It's the same, it's basically like identical code here. So when you have something like that, that's an opportunity to refactor. You could potentially refactor this into another function that's maybe more general. But Django has eventually evolved to do it in an object-oriented manner. So look at the documentation. So I have a search for Django class-based views, and I can go here. So Django, it would be good to take a look at this. So class-based views, functional views, they both work. You can do whatever you want. If this is more comfortable for you, you can kind of see everything that's happening. In some ways, it's a lot easier. It's more transparent. You kind of have more control over what you're doing, but it's also, there's more repetition. So it's 100% up to you. Here is an example of a class-based view. So here's a view function, right? Which is typical function, takes in a request. We check if it's get or post, and then we do whatever, and then we return a response object. In this case, this render is ultimately returning a response object. So that's the basic pattern. Here, so view is the highest level. It's the base class, and there are a whole bunch of other subclasses that will use view and use lots of other things. So the way that this works is you create a class called whatever you want, and then that inherits from view or like a dozen of other view classes. And then in this case, it exposes a get and post method. So you define a get method that will handle, instead of doing if request.method equals get, do whatever, you just define the get method, and then you define a post method for there. And then when you actually use it in the URLs, so if we go to the URLs here we just pass it the function that we want. So post list, new post, whatever. If you use a class, this this path function still expects basically a function here as the second parameter. So if you pass it a class, Django gives you this basically wrapper that will turn your class-based view into a function, or something that acts like a function. So you just have to make sure that you call as view when you use it in your URLs here. You don't need to memorize that, you just look at the documentation. All right. So I'm gonna go, so there's one view. So view is the most general. There's also, I'm just gonna go ahead and we'll take a look at this in the source code real quick. Django.views. So here we are in the Django source code. So view. Intentionally simple parent class for all views. Only implements dispatch by method and simple sanity checking. So here's the as view, which we're getting called, and then we don't need to really worry about any of this other stuff. But that's the base view, and you can definitely use the base view, and that's fine. There's also a whole bunch of other ones. So I'm going to do create. Let me see the other views here. Mixins. So does anyone know what a mixin is? So a mixin is basically just it's a class. And it's usually, so if we have something like this view class, I'll go back here and we can take a look at some of this other code. So here, for example, is a redirect view. Let me see this one. Context mixin, for example. So Django actually calls these mixins. And it's usually, it's a way to add very specific functionality. So it's not, it's basically using composition, like has a relationship. So I have a class, I have a basic class like a view or whatever, and I want to add like this other method. So one way of doing that is you can use inheritance. So you could inherit from this mixin, but it's called a mixin because it's kind of letting you know that it's not really a it's not really like a full parent class. It's just got something useful in it that we're going to use. So I'm going to look for the create view. Okay, so here is there are a whole bunch of these views, and I'm going to import this. This is from views.generic.edit.create view. So I'm going to import this right here in the code, and then we can just look at it real quick. So from Django.views generic.edit, import create view. And we go here. And here's where, so this is at a fairly low level. So view is at the very, it's at the base level. It's the root of the tree. Again, whether that's up or down is confusing, but it's at the root of the tree. And then create view is kind of a leaf node. So it's at the bottom. So to get from create view all the way back up to view, you'd have to hop around quite a bit. So create view inherits from two other things. So one is this single object template response mixin. So this is another mixin that's going to add some functionality. And then the other thing is base create view. So you can see that this class in itself doesn't really do much. It's basically just a wrapper for these two other things. So I want to combine these two other things together. I create this. Then we can take a look at this. We can hop around to here, the base create view. And there's a little bit more. So there's a get method and a post method that are implemented. But that's not all, right? There's model form mixin, which we don't have to know what all this stuff actually is, but this is just to give you a taste for your future hopping around code bases. So this process form view, you can take a look at that. Process form view actually inherits from view. So here is another get and post, which is actually overridden by a previous class, and then we hop back up to view, and here we are. So the create view, to go from create view to view, you've got to go like 4 levels up. And there's a bunch of other stuff too, right? So this stuff can be complicated. This is one of the, I would say one of the downsides of object-oriented programming is that if I just look at create view, right? I'm here, I'm just looking at create view. I can't really tell what create view does or what it has available to it. I kind of have to map all this stuff out. And if it's very complicated, if the hierarchy is very complicated, it gets messy and it's hard to keep track of what's going on. But that's how Django is structured. Okay, so to go back here to the view, this create view, the class-based views work very similarly to, for example, the model, which gives you basically, this is a Django class that's going to get turned into a SQL statement. And this form this is a Django class that's going to get turned into HTML. And this view, this create view, is going to be a class which is going to get basically turned into a function. So let's, instead of using new post here, we're going to make this a class-based view. And you can mix and match freely. So you can use some methods, you can use some classes. So class, let's do my create view. That's going to inherit from create view. And we look at the documentation. So the documentation for create view, it tells you where it is in the source code, which we've just seen. And it also tells you everything that it inherits from. So we know that it ultimately will inherit from view because all views do. And at the first level, we saw single object template response mixin and template response mixin. So this this MRO, this is called method resolution order. So if you have a class, this is kind of a problem. It's like a well-known problem with object-oriented programming. If you have multiple inheritance, one reason why some languages don't allow you to do multiple inheritance. Python does, but then there's potential conflict, right? If I call a method and I have two parents that both have that method, which one do I use? So there's Python has an order that it will resolve the stuff in. It's called method resolution order. You don't really need to worry about it, but so this is kind of the order that Django will call stuff. That Django will look for things. So if I call a method in my create view instance, it's going to check here, then check here, then check here, and so on and so on. So here's an example usage. So we're going to import that, which we've just done, and then we have our model, and then that's pretty much it. So we inherit from create view, and then we have the model, which is going to be your table, and then the fields. So it looks just like the form, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So we have model, and this will be post, yeah. And then fields. Let's do fields. So let me check the model. Let's do title, text, and publish date. All right. So now I'm gonna have to go and update my my URLs because I have this new thing. So my create view. So new post doesn't exist anymore. So we do this, but because it's a class-based view, we also have to add this as view. So we're just gonna make this consumable as a function. Okay, and now we're running. So everything should basically work exactly the same. It's not, but we'll add something else. Posts new. So the title, I think maybe we're on 5, and publish date, something like that. Enter a valid date time. This is why I didn't want to do this. So I'm going to go back to the model, and I'm just going to comment this out real quick. And then let's see views. I'll probably just end up trashing the database, but Python image.py operations. Python image.py migrate. All right, and run the server. Go back here. All right, so title 5.5 and save. Okay, so I've got an issue, which is the same problem we would have had with our view had we not added author here. So it's saying not null constraint failed. So it basically, if we want to create an instance of a blog post, we need an author ID. It's a foreign key, and so by default, foreign keys are not null. We could change that, but as it is, the database is complaining. So we had this figured out with the function view, but with the class-based view, it doesn't. Let's like, what do we do here? So what you have to do is you have to override a method that's going to be called. So here we have kind of very detailed control over everything that's happening. With the class-based views, when you want to customize them in Django, you have to do a little bit more work, and you have to figure out kind of where that thing is happening. And sometimes you're gonna have to look in that hierarchy and figure out what method is going to be called when, and then you can kind of hook into that and do your custom stuff there. In this case, there's a form valid. The form valid. It's going to get called. I'm just going to cover. So I looked this up previously. So form, and we should be able to find that. So we'll look around the source code real quick. And I'll call the super. So super. Oops. Form valid. And for now, just to see kind of what's happening, so I'll print the form. All right, go back here, 5.5, save it, get the error, and let's see if we get that printed. Lots of errors, lots of errors. Here is the form. So this is the form being printed out. So that's where it's happening, and I'll take a look at the so here, for example, is where this is actually happening. So we can see what class this is in. Model form mixin. So this method is getting called. This is part of the model form mixin. And if we look at the Django documentation, model form mixin is right there. So that's where this is being called. So we have access to the form here. And the reason you almost always want to call super after you override stuff, because Django is probably doing a bunch of other work with stuff, and it's just you just keep everything flowing basically. You can tweak something, but then you like pass it up the chain. So that's why we're calling super, and even this one is calling super. So what we want to do here is add the author. So form dot instance dot author. So there's this stuff's a little tricky. So this is one reason why class-based views are kind of a pain. But so there'll be an instance property that's available to you, and you would just have to look this up to figure out how to do it, basically. And that would be self dot request dot user. So we use self because we're in classes, and there's that request is available, and then user. So if we do this, I'm gonna not print that, run the server, and let's go back here and we'll try to create this. I think I might have to just make a new request here. Okay. So we have a new problem, which is often good. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go, well, we'll read the error and then we'll go look at the database and see if it was actually saved. It says improperly configured at posts new. So no URL to redirect to. And it tells us occasionally Django actually gives you a helpful error message. This is one of those cases. Either provide a URL or define a get absolute URL method on the model. So when we're handling all this ourselves, we just redirect, right? We just redirect and we choose where we want to redirect. Again, with the class-based view, it's not obvious how you do that. So you have to look this up, or you can kind of just get the error and hopefully the error will point you in the right direction. This get absolute URL method. So I'm going to go back in the source code to this form valid thing. And this was in the, again, I'm just going in the source code just to kind of give you some more flavor for how things work, but really you shouldn't have to do this. Shouldn't really have to do this. Okay, so the model form mixin is where this where we're overriding get form valid. But look what's right here, get success URL, which is what we need. Well, get absolute URL. And I think we could actually use get success URL. I think there's another way of doing this. So Django has been around for a long time, and there's usually several ways of doing the same thing. So I'm going to search for this error. Do Django class-based views. So there's a couple things we could do. Here's an example. I mean, is this the answer? Okay. So one thing is here's a create view, which is actually what we're using, which is nice. So we have get success URL. So we're going to override that, and then you return reverse blah blah blah, and then this is going to be the named URL, which is just like basically it's basically the same thing here. We could have also used reverse there. There is another, let's see if there's a more recent one. See if I can find it. Okay, well, so there's a couple ways to do it. I'm going to do it this way, the easy way. There is a success URL field that you can give it. So here you can do success URL. You can also override, you can override the get absolute URL. You can also override get success URL. So there's a few different things you can, points you can jump in and do this. So reverse, I'll have to import reverse from, I believe it's this. No, maybe it's from URLs. Could do reverse lazy. And then I should be able to pass in this case, that's what we want to do. All right, let's see if this works. So go back here. First, let me let's go to the admin and see if post 6 got created. It did. So it worked, but the redirect messed up. So it got to the point where it was able to save it to the database, but the redirect failed. All right, let's go back to forms/new. Not forms, posts. 7. Okay, so no reverse match, reverse post detail with no arguments found. Reverse lazy. Let's do the list instead of the detail. So we could pass it this and then pass it a second argument, which is arguments, because post detail, if we want to redirect the detail, it requires this post ID. So you could pass in an object which has the post ID, but I'm not gonna. I'll just use a different one for now. So post, which is probably what you should do. So post list. I'll just check the URLs to make sure that it has the same name. It does. Okay. Go back here. Let's do 8. 8. Save it. Let's see. Let me try this one more time. Nine. Okay, let me see.
Did migrate view have to return anything?
It shouldn't have to return. Maybe this needs to return. Yeah, that is probably it. Let me do this one more time. There you go. Thank you. Cool. So that works now. So is this, is this better or worse? I don't know. You can, it's definitely, there's less repetition, but with the class-based views, if you want to do customization stuff, you have to do work to figure out kind of where that's happening and how you can hook into the normal cycle of method calls. Here, it's more tedious, but it's also more transparent. So it's up to you, but it's good to be familiar with both. All right, so let's take a break, and then when we come back, we're gonna play around with different databases. So we'll come back at 20 after, so like 8 or 9 minutes.